All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Shardul Ghogale. It's June 19th, 2024. We're at Left Coast Estate in Rickreall. Shardul, thank you so much for joining us today. First question, why wine?
Well, thanks for coming out, Rich. It's great to be a part of this, and I applaud the projects that you've taken on behalf of Linfield. What brought me into wine? Long story. I wasn't exposed to wine growing up. Coming from an Indian background, culturally, wine wasn't a big part of our lifestyle. But what did bring me into wine was a chance encounter with my mentor, Cecilia Oldney. She's a Swedish somm, celebrated somm, moved to India when she was in her late 20s, attracted by the dynamic market there, growing, nascent, exciting. And she's the one who actually molded me into, the professional that I am today. But growing up, my dad is in the mint and flavor industry, flavor and fragrances, and I fell in love with that growing up. I was exposed to it. And his core business is mint, essential oils that companies like Colgate would use in their toothpaste, or Wrigley's would use in their chewing gums. And so I grew up with mint all around me, the fragrances, the flavors, and of course they did more beyond mint, but that's what excited me. And that's what trained me to have a nose where I can pick up these unique primary, secondary, tertiary aromatics and flavors. And so I went to school, growing up in Canada. I went to school initially for engineering, automotive engineering, because I still am crazy about cars. But when I was in my undergrad program, we had the major global financial crisis in '08, and our program was sponsored by Chrysler Motor Company. And they went bankrupt that year, so they stopped funding the program, and there was a lot of uncertainty around the automotive industry back then. So I decided to jump ship, go into business. I always had a knack for business, but I thought I'd do something that I was passionate about, because I'd be drawing cars on the back of my notebooks growing up as a kid. But when that didn't pan out, I went to business school, and then I started doing internships in flavor companies, never with my dad, but with other flavor companies. And that's where I was exposed to a broader range of flavors, fragrances, what consumers want, and how subjective it is. And I did most of those internships in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. In fact, I even worked for Cadbury, the chocolate company, over a summer. So I got a really nice exposure to flavors, to fragrances. And then when I graduated, I went up to my dad and I said, "Hey Dad, I'm ready to come work for you." He told me to go take a hike. So I went out and I interviewed with all of his competitors, because obviously I couldn't deal with him saying no. And I got to a certain stage with them where they eventually found out who my dad was, and they're like, "Well, we can't hire you because you're our competitor's son. We've got all these trade secrets that we need to keep, within the company." And so, I was dejected, and I didn't know what was going to work out for me. And so I took up a job with one of my mom's friends, and it was more of a tech company. I didn't know what I was doing there, just helping out, doing some basic stuff while I found my feet and found my calling. And it just so happened that right across that office was a wine company. And that was an Indian wine company. It was called Sula Vineyards. It is the largest wine producer in India. And I can tell you why I ended up in India down the road. But that's, when I really found wine was at Sula. And I went in, I met with the HR person, and I saw that they had an opening in their international business department. But when I met with the HR executive, they had already filled that position. But I left my resume with her. I said, if anything comes up, please let me know. And my resume made it to Cecilia's table somehow. And she saw it, and she liked what she was seeing, and she thought she could really mold me into a good professional, having that international background, growing up in Canada. And I think she just saw a lot of similarities in us. And so she hired me as basically her assistant, almost like an EA. My first task was to rearrange her business cards. And she was extremely unorganized. So she loved what I did with that first project. And she kept giving me more things to do. And I succeeded one step at a time. And eventually she encouraged me to do WSET courses. So I did the level 1 and I did the level 2 while I was at Sula. And then I knew at that point that I needed to do more. I needed more education. I needed to expand my horizon. So I went looking for a master's program. And I came across an MBA in wine and spirits management out in Bordeaux. This was about 3.5, 4 years into my job at Sula, and I kept getting promotions almost every year. So I had incredible success there at a very young age. So I found this MBA program and I applied for it. And I had an interview with the program director, and I was the only Indian wine professional or wine professional working in India to have ever applied for that program, and I was the first one to get admitted into the program. And so I went out to Bordeaux, and as part of that MBA program, they'd make us travel to different wine producing regions across the world. So we did Bordeaux, Cognac, Champagne. We did Sonoma, Napa, South Australia, China, Hong Kong, back to Bordeaux for graduation. So it was an incredible experience, but the company was very nice to me, Sula. They saw a lot of potential in me, and they encouraged me to go out and finish this program because it did take time away from the office. And while I was doing that program, I was also experiencing great success in my career. We were doing a private label project for Marks and Spencer in the UK. We became the first and only Indian wine producer to get listed with Air India, the national air carrier. We got our wines in their economy class and business class, and I was in charge of all of that at such a young age. So I got really good exposure, and that's where I met the youngest son of Left Coast's founding family, was at the MBA program. And we became really good friends. We traveled the world together. We found a lot of similarities. He graduated from UBC, the University of British Columbia, at around the same time as my sister did, so they overlapped there. My sister ran track, and his now wife was the physiotherapist for the track team. So all these similarities, incredible interest in history, and of course, passion for wine. And so we were in Hong Kong one night having some fancy cocktails, and I just threw it out there. I said, if there's ever an opportunity for us to be partners in this business that your parents have established, let me know. So I think 6 months down the road, when we reconnected in Bordeaux, there was an opportunity. And that's basically what brought me here and continued my journey in wine, this time in Oregon.
That's quite a story. So tell me about your own sort of wine education, learning about wine beyond sort of the flavor aroma part. What was exciting to you about learning about wine as you dove into the WSET, as you dove into that? What made you want to continue that path?
Sure. So like I said, Sula really encouraged education with the WSET level 1 and level 2. But Sula was also an importer. So beyond producing its own wines made from Vitis vinifera grown in India, they were importing wines from Argentina, Chile, Australia, Champagne from France, and spirits too. The William Grant's whiskey range, Ballantine, etc., etc. So that really gave me great exposure to wines from across the world. And I fell in love with wines, honestly. I love the complexity of wine. I love the concept of terroir and the impact that it has on wine, and what makes each wine unique in itself, which, terroir lends to. Winemaking, viticulture, all of that was fascinating to me. My family has, history in agriculture, and more so in value-added products out of agriculture. So my granddad was the managing director of State Farming Corporation that basically ran all the sugar cane fields and the sugar mills out in India. And then my dad moved into, the mint business, extracting flavors from nature, from natural resources. And then I continued that so-called legacy with Vitis vinifera and wine. But that exposure is what really gave me the passion for wine. And eventually when I came back from the MBA program, I took over my mentor's job. She moved up as head of marketing for the entire company, and I became the head of exports and travel retail. So I would spend a lot of time at the winery in Sula, working with buyers, working with our winemakers to create unique blends for them. Like I said, that private label project that we did with Marks and Spencer, they bought 3 different SKUs from us, a red, white, and a rosé. So I was involved in the blending process. I was involved in the final blend selection, working out the costs, working out pricing. I just found that extremely fascinating. And then of course the MBA program, which took us to different wine producing regions, really opened up the world of wine to me. And that's when I really knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Here at Left Coast, I'm predominantly in charge of sales here, but I do have my hand in every pie here, right from viticulture to winemaking, to the tasting room, consumer and customer interaction. And I find all of that put together holistically is really rewarding. Creating a product that is more than just a consumer product, which has emotion, which has a soul, which improves with age, and which communicates with a customer beyond just the marketing jargon, is extremely fascinating. And I think that passion, as long as it exists here, is what drives success for me and for Left Coast.
You talked about all your early travels as you were working. You mentioned ending up in India. So why India? And also along those lines, tell me about the wine industry in India at that time.
Sure. I was born in India. I have one grandma who still lives in India. So I am connected to it in many ways than one. I love India. For all its challenges, for all its misgivings, it's a beautiful place, it's fascinating, and it's magical. But 2011, when I graduated, was when I found out that my cousin, who was 6 months younger than I, was diagnosed with cancer. And, being young, I didn't really understand the magnitude of that till I went to see him myself, and family got together, and I still remember the day when the doctor came and spoke to me and my dad and my granddad and his mom, who's my aunt, and gave us the news that he's probably not going to make it. And he didn't. It affected our family in many ways than one. I think my granddad, more than anyone, just kind of gave up on life. He lost that spark, and he passed away soon after. And then I lost my mom's dad, and a year later my mom's mom. So we had these difficult times within the span of a year. And I saw the impact that it had on the rest of the family. And knowing that my parents were both working professionals in their own right, captains of industry, I knew that I had to play a bigger role. So I decided to stay back, spend some time with my grandma, help her get back on her feet, because I'm close to her. I still am. In my younger days, I spent 2 years of my life with her when my parents had my sister, who was an accident child, and they couldn't take care of me. So I spent 2 years with my grandparents, and I'm really close to them. So I felt for her, so I stayed back, and with the successive loss of family members, I realized that I needed to be there for longer, and that's when I went out looking for a job, and then all of the aforementioned things happened. But I feel fortunate to have that experience, to be able to live and work in a developing country with all its challenges, being able to be close to my grandma. It's a fascinating industry. It was nascent back then. Sula itself was founded in, I believe, 2001. So it's just over 20 years old. And they've achieved so much in those 20 years. They're making wines that have won gold medals at international competitions, Decanter, Syrah du Monde. And they make warm climate varietals, of course, because it's India. But their growing season is the winter time. So they get the diurnal shift. And most of the vineyards you'll find in a valley just east of Mumbai. I'd say about 80 to 100 miles east of Mumbai in a valley of Nasik, where they have traditionally been growing table grapes and onions. And so the founder of Sula, Rajiv Samant, identified that as a great location to grow Vitis vinifera because he graduated from Stanford and he saw what they were doing in California and he saw some similarities there. So he got in touch with a celebrated winemaker, Kerry Damsky, out of California, and together they built the wine industry in India. I believe they produce over 1 million bottles of wine. I'd say about 80% of that is value wine, which gets sold in India, but 5% of that gets exported, the high-end wines where they're using French oak. They're using all the traditional methods, and these are good wines. So I was impressed back then because, I was exposed to Chinese wines as well, and they weren't that good. Even when I went out to Shanghai as part of the MBA program, the wines back then were not that good. Whereas the Indian wine industry, I feel, caught up much faster than some places. So within 20 years, they were winning awards and showcasing wines all over the world. And as head of exports, I was exporting to 35 countries. Over 50,000 cases of Indian wine to places like Japan, Germany, the US, the UK, of course, Spain. Just incredible. So I feel like I got lucky because I got to ride the wave that was the growing Indian wine market, which was extremely dynamic. And it is still growing at a slower rate, but it is still growing and the wines are getting better and better. It's an extremely dynamic marketplace, much like the US. Each state has its own laws and regulations when it comes to taxation, labeling. So it's like working in 50 different states or 50 different countries with its own unique tax structure, with its own unique labeling requirements. Some states, much like Pennsylvania here, are controlled states in India where the state government would own the liquor stores themselves, so you have to work with the governments. The defense, what they call canteen stores in India, which is basically the army, having their own stores for their soldiers at a discounted price. That was a huge a revenue channel for the company. And then exports, even though exports were less than 5%, it was basically marketing. We were getting the word out to folks across the world and bringing them to India to showcase what we're able to do beyond what India is known for, spiritualism, the food, the culture. Sula has its own tasting room in Nasik, and that is the place where most Indians have tasted wine for the first time. That's where Sula sells the most amount of wine out of the one retail outlet. So it's an educational journey as well for the company, for consumers in India, and I feel blessed being able to have been part of that journey. I was with the company for 6 years. I moved to Oregon in 2017, having quit Sula as their head of export and travel retail, and then came in here initially as a consultant, basically to learn the industry, to learn the company, the ins and outs, running SWOT analysis, seeing where we can improve, essentially, using that MBA to its full potential. And eventually, of course, they liked what I was doing, and then I took over sales for the company, which includes wholesale, which is distribution across 35 states, tasting room sales, wine club, online sales. Wearing multiple hats, but Sula is what gave me that platform, what gave me the intent, and which built that passion, which continues to this day.
Tell me about the challenges of a region that is so new and has no real international or even local reputation yet. You mentioned it being an educational journey. Tell me about that. How do you educate the world on Indian wine, especially if you think it's good enough to be there?
Right. So what we found as a strategy was it's easy to look at Indian cuisine and how wine pairs with Indian cuisine. In fact, I'm doing a dinner this Saturday where we're pairing Indian food with Left Coast's wines, because it does work. It does work. Wine, if you know what you're looking for, can pair with any cuisine. And there's enough wine out there for you to be able to do that. But what we did was to get our wines, the Indian wines, into Indian restaurants predominantly, because that's where you can have the best exposure to people that drink wine. Most Indians don't drink wine. Even in India, I don't know what it is today, but 5 years ago, per capita income was a teaspoon, which is nothing. It's nothing. Of course, you've got over 1 billion people there, so those teaspoons add up, but it's still nothing. The potential is there. And so, people that had the tradition, that grew up drinking wine, that were exposed to wine, were more open to trying Indian wine in an Indian restaurant. I talked about that project that we did with Marks & Spencer. We did a meal pack with Marks & Spencer. So it was an Indian pre-cooked, pre-packed meal with a bottle of Indian wine, and it worked. So we had a Syrah there where you could pair it with Indian food that had pepper, right? So that worked really well. We had a rosé that was made out of Zinfandel that worked well with something like a chicken tikka masala with a little bit of spice, just balancing it out. And then we had a Sauvignon Blanc there that worked well with kebabs, for example, or creamy dishes that had what we call in India malai, which is cream, essentially. So it's about being innovative. It's about finding the low-hanging fruit first and then taking on bigger projects. We also had our wines in duty-free outlets in India, in Dubai, where a lot of people coming in and out of India connect through Dubai, of course. But that exposure in duty-free outlets really helped us as well, because folks that flew back home could take a bottle of Indian wine and showcase that to their friends. So obviously word of mouth was big, but we had great partners across the world that understood how to sell wine. Here in the US, we worked with Dreyfus Ashby out of New York, and they're fantastic. They've got a track record of success. So they got us in most celebrated Indian restaurants across the country, and that's what really gave us the exposure. Of course, being available in Indian stores helps as well. Of course, I am yet to find a bottle of Indian wine in any of the Indian grocery stores here in Oregon, but I do know that some of the restaurants carry Indian wine here, which is fantastic. So it's good to see. And then, of course, going out and participating in wine shows, Pro Wine in Dusseldorf, London Wine Fair, going out to Hong Kong for the International Wine and Spirits Award competition, submitting wines for awards, for critical approval. All of that obviously helps from a marketing standpoint. But honestly, Sula never looked at export as a huge revenue generating arm. Of course, we made good money, but the margins were low, of course. As compared to selling domestically, they will always be lower. But it was more of a marketing activity, where we wanted to showcase Indian wines to the world and attract them to India to experience more than just the food and the culture. Now, Sula was smart in the sense that it had its own hospitality setup. So if you wanted to come out to the vineyard and get a first-hand experience of how wine is made in India, you could get tours of the winery and all that, but you had a place to stay. And I think that really worked. It drew over, I know the tasting room used to draw over 800,000 people annually to the tasting room. So, even if 10% of that ends up staying back overnight, that's good money. So I believe they did all the right things as a company. I have a lot of respect for the CEO and his vision, and I'd love to be able to bring that model here with hospitality playing a bigger role. I think here in Oregon, we've done a great job with wine and with getting the word out there. Of course, there's a lot more than we can do. We're making less than 2% of the wine that's consumed here in the US. So there's a long ways to go, but I think having hospitality here that is run by winemakers and wine growers will make an impact in the future. And that's a gap that I've seen in Oregon as of today.
You mentioned Cecilia, your mentor. Tell me about your relationship with her and sort of growing into that role.
So I think Cecilia and I connected because, both of us grew up outside of India. Both of us were attracted to India for different reasons. Both of us found a purpose in India, and we both had the passion. She saw that passion. She saw my strengths. She also saw my weaknesses. And not coming from a background in wine was a weakness. And so she was able to direct me into, the WSET courses and sitting through blending sessions and learning and just being more present in her sessions as well. She really guided me in the right direction. She was my biggest supporter. Of course, I still credit her with my successes. She did leave the wine industry later for better pastures. So right now she's working with the Swedish diplomatic mission in India, representing them in their councils, various commercial councils and businesses, and connecting Indian businesses with Swedish businesses. And she still loves India. She's passionate about what she does. She worked with Amphora Wines based out of London, which basically provides services such as storing high-end wines for high net worth individuals, etc. And they also opened up an arm in India. So she's business savvy, she's smart, she's young, she's passionate, and she knows how to get shit done. And that's something I really learned from her, is how to get things done. Don't take no for an answer. And find ways to work with others. So I learned more from her than just wine. I learned how to be empathetic. I think that's really important, and I think women are better at that than we are. So I was lucky to have her to teach me some of these intrinsic characteristics that you would never learn in an MBA program, for example. She taught me how to be passionate, compassionate, and because I was able to communicate with the locals there, I was a big support for her as well. So we travel across India. Even though I didn't sell any wine actively in India, we would together host high-end events across India. So I was always that support system for her, and I would help her get stuff done. So that she was also a perfectionist. And sure, it might have some drawbacks, but it taught me to always aim high and always push yourself for excellence. And sure, it might have affected my health and hers too. It is exhausting, but I think it's worth it at the end of it all. Expecting more out of yourself at every stage, trying to improve, trying to basically just never feeling complacent. And I think complacency is something that can kill passion. So through my career, even here in Oregon, I've always tried to do more. My first few years here were just trying to find my feet, establishing those relationships with the distributors, with locals, with the industry here. And then I went and did the WSET course at Linfield University. So Tony was my instructor, and I did that through COVID because we were all home. So I was like, let's do something productive beyond making calls to distributors because I'm stuck at home. So I signed up for the WSET course, and of course Left Coast supported that next step in my education, wine education. And Tony was fantastic, just incredible teacher. I have a lot of respect for her. And I was lucky to be successful in my first try, in my first attempt. And then Tony recognized my ability to taste and to critique the wine, to write about the wine, because the level 3, of course, involves tasting 2 wines and writing about it and being judged on that. And so she invited me to be a guest instructor at Linfield. For almost 2 years, I taught the level 1 and level 2 courses under Stephanie Mitchell at Linfield. And that in itself was rewarding because I got to not only meet professionals in the industry, but meet professionals that were aiming higher, were trying to expand their own horizons. And I found that fascinating because we're both on this journey of growing our knowledge base in wine, and I was facilitating that. So I got a lot of intrinsic satisfaction from doing that. And I'm happy to say that I believe everyone but one student passed from the over 10 sessions that I might have hosted as a guest instructor at Linfield. Beyond that, the industry as a whole here in Oregon is very accepting. I'm sure you know, it's very collaborative. We work together for our mutual success. And so I wanted to give back to the industry, this industry that basically accepted me as an outsider for my abilities and for my knowledge, as opposed to who I was and where I came from and who my father was or who my mother was. And I found that extremely endearing. And so I thought, how can I give back? How can I give back to this industry that is giving me a platform for my next career stage, so to say, after Sula? And so I volunteered my time to be on the steering committee for Pinot Camp, for Oregon Pinot Camp. And I was voted on the steering committee in November of 2023. So 2023 was my first year as a steering committee member. And then last year I was appointed as the chair of finance and transportation for Pinot Camp. Beyond that, as a steering committee member, I was also appointed to the board of the Willamette Valley Wineries Association as of January of this year is when I began my term.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So again, I'm a new entrant on the board, so I'm still kind of finding my feet, cheering the veterans. Just having that time with them is incredible. Learning from them, understanding their viewpoints, the history behind it, and their passion to maintain the tradition that we have with winemaking here, even though it's short, but also looking forward and understanding the challenges that we're facing in today's day and age. The industry and the landscape is extremely dynamic, and though we're facing certain headwinds here in the US when it comes to wine consumption, I think overall the outlook is positive overall, because we know that we're there together as an industry for each other. And I've seen people step up and help each other out, and I think the board does a great job in information finding and providing marketing support for smaller wineries that can't do it themselves. So I applaud the Willamette Valley for everything that it does, and it's an absolute pleasure to be involved and to be a part of it.
What was your familiarity with Oregon wine before you got here?
None whatsoever. The only Oregon wines that I had tasted were Left Coast wines that Taylor had brought down to California when we met during one of the MBA sessions. And there was something distinctly unique about those wines that drew me to them. I've tasted wines from all over the world, from New Zealand, from California, from Burgundy even, and more so Pinot Noir. But there's something about Oregon Pinot that stands out. I'm a judge at the LA International Wine Competition. This year was my first year judging there as well. And I was able to pick out the Oregon Pinot Noirs out of, it's a blind tasting. And so, again, it's so distinct and so unique, and there's something special about these wines. When I tasted it back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, I just knew that there was something special in that bottle. And then I did my research. I tried to taste as many wines as I could, Pinot Noir, just to see what spoke to me. And I think Oregon Pinot spoke to me in more ways than one. Coming here also, Taylor did take me out to different tasting rooms. We explored the valley together. He took over as CEO here at Left Coast in 2016 as well. So, our journeys here have kind of mirrored each other. We bank off each other's strengths, identify each other's weaknesses, try and help each other. So as business partners, I couldn't have asked for anyone better. We're the same age. We got married at the same time. He had a son last year. I'm about to have my son this.
Congratulations again.
Summer.
There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on. But that journey with him, exploring wines here, exploring AVAs and nestled AVAs, and how different those wines taste from each other too, is what really continues this passion that I have for Oregon wine. And being able to call the Van Duzer Corridor AVA our AVA is special. It's truly special because our wines speak to that AVA, and it speaks to this region within the Willamette Valley, and that's what makes us special. And I respect that in more ways than one. And as a sales guy, it's important that I'm able to communicate that with my customers. Having Joe Wright as our winemaker makes my job that much easier because the wines are fantastic. So of course the product speaks for itself, but this property, the Van Duzer Corridor, the winds that funnel in through the corridor, that's what I'm trying to communicate to the customers. The diurnal shifts that we face, that's what makes our wines unique. And that's what I find satisfying, going out there and communicating that story, communicating our commitment to sustainability, to this land, and being able to pass that on to the next generation. I think that's what consumers find attractive and something that they can connect with. Of course, that helps us sell the wine as well.
Tell me about you mentioned kind of starting here as a consultant, and tell me about kind of the steps along the way between then and now, what your role looks like today. How do you spend your time today?
Sure. So like I said, my dad was in the mint business, and some of the best spearmint and peppermint is grown here in the Willamette Valley. It's unfortunate that the acreage is shrinking, but he's been buying mint from the Willamette for as long as I've been alive. So he's had friends here that he's close to even today. He's been here multiple times. He knows this area. I had no idea. Who would have thought that I would end up in Oregon? Growing up in Toronto, I didn't even think of Oregon. Of course, we all heard of Portland and Portlandia and and the wackiness that Portland is known for. But I never saw myself ending up here. And touch wood, life has been kind to me. But when I tasted the wines, when I did my research, and when there was the opportunity to invest in Left Coast and be a partner here, of course, I involved my father because this is a family business. It's not just me. My sister is also an owner. She's not active in the business, but She is an owner, as is Taylor's sister, who's also not an active owner here at Left Coast. Sure, she's done a lot of the landscaping that you see here, and she advises us on many things, including creatives and things like design, but she's not an active owner. But when I brought this opportunity to my dad, he was like, I know the Willamette. Let me make some phone calls. And so he did make some phone calls. And he had some friends drive out to Left Coast incognito. And they just had great things to say about this place. And of course, when we did come out ourselves for that initial visit, before we had signed any paperwork and drove in through those front gates like you did this morning, we were just blown away by the property. The commitment to sustainability, again, the stewardship of this land is what really drove us into taking that next step and actually investing in the business. So yes, we are partners, minority ownership. The founding family is generational and forward-thinking. So the founders are not owners at Left Coast. It's their kids that are owners now. So Taylor, his sister Callie, and his brother Carlton, who I bought out of the business. And then there's a trust that owns about 45% of the business, which is for the grandkids. So as of today, we have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old that are also owners in the business that actually own more of this business than I do. So again, it's forward thinking, it's generational. I thought it made more sense coming on board as a consultant rather than a director or a high level executive with the investment, so that I could learn the marketplace, the industry, how relationships matter, working with our distributors, understanding the dynamics, looking at gaps in the business. We're a family-owned business, so we do many things as owners. We'll be packing boxes for wine club shipments. We'll be cleaning the garbage here if needed. We'll do the sweeping. We'll plant flowers, whatever it takes. So certainly there were certain gaps in the business, and I think that initial stage as a consultant helped me understand what the company needed, what it was doing right, and how we could improve from that baseline. And then, of course, as a consultant, I did have recommendations that the CEO implemented, and they were successful. And because of that success, I came on board full-time as the director of sales. Initially, just doing wholesale, distribution sales and export, but now also looking at DTC, wine club, tasting room, web sales. Beyond that, Taylor and I basically function as co-GMs of the business. Whatever needs to be done, we will do. So there's no, that's not my lookout. If it needs to be done, we'll step in and do it. Pinot Camp next week that we're hosting here, we have a lunch that we're hosting followed by a seminar, which is a lot of work, just getting everything lined out. So, just being on the ground. I've been spending more time here than I used to. Pre-COVID, I'd spend more time on a plane, going out to different markets, spending time with distributors and owners of our distribution partners. And my goal was to make us their #1 Oregon Pinot Noir. If their customer wanted a Pinot Noir from the Pacific Northwest, it would be Left Coast. That's what they're pulling out of their bag. And I think we got good success. And then, of course, with COVID, the changing dynamics in the marketplace, I think being that close to the market, having my ears to the ground, fingers on the pulse, maintaining those relationships, building new relationships, we were able to pivot relatively quickly from focusing on on-premise placements to off-premise placements. And I think that's what really took us through COVID. We got lucky in the sense that through the wildfires of 2020 also, of course, most people were affected here. We didn't make any red wines that year. We have 100 acres of Pinot Noir, that's predominantly what we're growing and making here. That's what we're known for, and that's what sells. But we make a white Pinot Noir that we're getting famous for, in fact. It's our fastest growing SKU as of today. But we, like I said, we didn't make any red wines from the 2020 vintage. It all went into the white Pinot Noir project. And it might be serendipitous, but Aldi stores out of the UK was looking for white Pinot. And we typically make 5,000 to 10,000 cases depending on the vintage of white Pinot any given year. We ended up making 15,000 cases of white Pinot that year just because we didn't have any red wine. And so with all this excess white Pinot, we had to find a channel to sell through, or else we'll be selling white Pinot for the next 2 years. And you know, most consumers look at a white wine and they want fresh, newest vintage. And so this opportunity with Aldi came along, and because of the background and the knowledge that I had built working with a retailer like Marks and Spencer in the UK, I was able to use that to get over 5,000 cases of white Pinot out to the UK, with the white Pinot basically available in every store that Aldi has in England and Ireland. That's almost 1,000 stores. So that project really took us through those difficult times, through COVID. And sure, you know, the market was changing, but people were at home. People were drinking a lot of wine. So just being available was important. And then being available in the UK was also important. We opened up a new market. We export to Canada, South Korea, Singapore. But that export, that one sale, helped us buy a brand new press, which now improves our efficiencies with the white Pinot that we produce here. So, you know, we've been lucky, touch wood, things have fallen into place for us. I think just us trying to do the best we can, and luck, a little bit of luck, and having Joe make these beautiful expressions of Pinot Noir from the Van Duzer corridor makes everything that much easier.
Tell me about the space a little bit. Obviously, you mentioned earlier it was a big draw for you. So tell me about the land here and about sort of how you use it, how you showcase it.
Sure. So we own about 500 acres here, all contiguous. We have 165 of those under vines as of today. And every year we plant anywhere from 5 to 10 acres of new vines. So we're growing. Every year we grow. We've got a lot of room to grow in terms of plantable acreage. But beyond viticulture and winemaking, we've got these beautiful oak savannas that you see behind me. About 125 acres of protected forest. And as stewards of this land, we work with the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife to preserve the native Oregon white oak, which is down to just 3% coverage, in fact less than 3% across the entire state. And so for us it's important that we maintain, but also help grow the population of native Oregon oak trees here in Oregon, on our property specifically. All of this that you see here probably couldn't have been able to even see through 20 years ago. Just covered in Himalayan blackberries and hawthorns. And so it's been a process, but we've essentially converted 125 acres of forest into oak savannas with hiking paths, biking paths. We do a 5 and a 10K run here on the property. It's called Run for the Oaks. And all the proceeds go back into this oak restoration project. So you'll get to run through the oak forest, through the vineyards, and we'll have anywhere from 250 to 300 runners come out just for that event. And it's great. So clearly there is alignment in our efforts with the community as well, because they come out and support us. Beyond that, we are live certified. Both vineyard and winery, so low impact viticulture, which is important. We do farm certain lots organically, even though we're not certified organic, but we are certified sustainable. We're salmon safe as well. We also received the largest grant for solar power back in 2008 for a winery here in Oregon. So would have probably driven past our solar panels. As you drove in through the front gates, our winery has solar panels up top. So the winery itself is 100% solar powered. The entire estate is about 75% solar powered, just because we've had to build more assets here as we grow. As a company, we produce 20 to 25,000 cases on average every year. The winery maxes out at about 35,000 cases. But we're pretty happy where we are right now. We're able to sell through the wines that we produce, and we're able to make quality wines. And I think that's more important than volume, quality over quantity. The South Farm, which was one of the newest additions to the 500 acres, which we were able to buy when my family invested in the business and pumped in some capital into the business. That was 130 acres that we added on to take us up to 500 acres. That was a homestead. So we had a house there that was built in the early 1900s. We still have a barn that's standing as of today there, where we house our sheep. But there's a lot of history there. It used to be on one of the arms of the Oregon Trail that ended in Independence, Oregon. So there's history here. Beyond that, we know that this land was occupied by Native Americans, and they used to set grass fires here to maintain the forest. And because of the invasive species, you're not able to set those fires anymore because your oak trees are going to catch on fire. But now with this oak restoration project, we've introduced native grasses back into the forest. And so now if there was a grass fire, it wouldn't affect the oak trees at all. So it's these small steps that we take towards sustainability, towards being responsible stewards of the land. We also do our own rainwater harvesting down by the lake. We call that Lake Suzuki. And then all the pumps are solar powered. So we'll pump water up to the highest elevation on the property and then gravity feed most of the acreage here on the property. So for us, it's about the tiny carbon footprint. We also shifted over to lightweight glass bottles. So it's all adding to that carbon neutral challenge that we're a part of. We're founders of the Oak Accord, one of the founders. We'd like to be carbon neutral. Of course, with packaging material, that's a little difficult. But with the oak restoration projects, the forests, we're hoping that kind of balance itself out. And eventually, of course, we'd like to see the next generation come in, take over, and do all the right things for this property. That's the hope.
You mentioned work with Oregon Pinot Camp, Willamette Valley Winery Association. Obviously, still new to the WVWA, but been with Pinot Camp for a little while now. Tell me about working with OPC. What about that particular event drew you, and what are some of the things you've worked on?
Sure. So, Left Coast has been involved with Pinot Camp for a long, long time, and coming on as the sales guy for Left Coast, essentially. It's my job to bring buyers, important buyers, and account owners, trendsetters, influencers here as part of Pinot Camp. Every winery has to do its bit, 15 campers plus your instant invites. So I recognized right away what an important event this is for the industry as a whole. Sure, it's a marketing activity, but it goes beyond that. It's an educational event. It's an influential event. We want people that come out for Pinot Camp to go back and talk about it with everyone that they know. They want to talk about what a great experience it was, how fascinating it was to learn about terroir, sense of place, geology, geography, what created the Willamette Valley. How did the Missoula floods create the Willamette Valley? What did the lava floods do for us? Why are there different soil compositions across the Willamette Valley? And it's passing on the passion that we have for wine to these folks to then communicate onwards to their consumers and customers. And I think it's been extremely successful at that. Initially I would go out and pour on behalf of Left Coast at the various events that we were a part of. But with time, I saw the kind of work that people were putting in to host over 300 campers, not just transportation and finance, but culinary, setting the agenda, just getting everyone lined out. It's not an easy task. It's a lot of hard work, and I have a lot of respect for the camp manager, for Morgan, the executive director of the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, for the successes that we've had through Pinot Camp over the years. In fact, when I'm out in the market, most buyers that I meet have heard of Pinot Camp and want to come out for Pinot Camp. So they're vying for a spot here with other influencers and decision makers from across the country. Even distributors want to come out. So we use that as an incentive to get them to sell more wine. It's a no-brainer, and it works. It works because they want to come out, they want to experience Oregon and Pinot Camp, they want to learn. And Pinot Camp in itself is incredible. You've got these people with this history and this knowledge that they're just willing to share with you. Where else are you going to get that on this planet? I don't think anywhere, honestly, in my opinion. But going into the fields, going into the vineyards, having someone dig up a trench so that you can see the layers of the soil and how deep vines have to dig to survive, and what we do to make our vines struggle but also thrive, and then the winemaking approach at the end of it all. It's fascinating to me, and I think fascinating to campers that come out. Being on the steering committee, I get to see the feedback that we get. And as committee members, I would say that we're almost never satisfied with the work and the success. But that's because we see everything that goes on behind closed doors. But the kind of comments and the feedback that we get from campers every year is satisfying. It's satisfying to see that they took a lot from it and will go back and tell all their friends about it and get them revved up to want to come out for Pinot Camp as well.
You talked earlier about some of the kind of the challenges facing wine sales right now, especially in America. Tell me a little bit about how the last couple of years have gone. What are the headwinds you're seeing, and I guess what do you foresee? What do you foresee the next couple of years looking like?
I've always, for some reason or the other, touch wood, had success and growth through my career. And I'm able to quantify that because I do sales. So it's a numbers game at the end of the day. So 2020 was extremely disruptive. It was disruptive for everyone in many, many ways. But for the wine industry, if you weren't flexible, if you weren't able to pivot, you couldn't survive. And so I think that's one of the learnings that I took, was it's important to be able to pivot at any time and have that direct communication with your distributors, your gatekeepers out in the market. So we saw growth in 2020. Of course, we saw more growth in 21 and more so in 22. It's because most people were stuck at home. So 2023, in my opinion, was a course correction for the industry. I think the kind of growth that we saw through COVID was unprecedented and unnatural, and we probably should not see that again. As much as I'd like to see that kind of growth year on year, the cause and effect was disastrous. So partially it is course correction, and then the lack of a 2020 vintage. That has impacted Oregon wine and its standing in the U.S. Places like the Santa Barbara AVA really capitalized on that and filled in a lot of those gaps, or Sonoma even, that Oregon wines had left open. We typically make almost 18,000 cases of red wine any given year on an average vintage. That year we made about 1,000. So no red wines, no inventory. And I won't speak for others, but I believe most people face the same challenges as we did here at Left Coast. And so it was either we run out of wine or we take a price increase and slow down sales. What are the lesser of the two evils? So we took the price increase. And we did slow down sales. But what the price increases did for us, and I'm assuming for many others in the valley, was that it kicked us out of that sweet spot that we were in, that we enjoyed for so long, by the glass, you know, your $12 to $14 sweet spot. And sure, with inflation, that has moved up to 14 to 16 now. But through COVID, our costs of production skyrocketed. We were paying almost the same for transportation that we were for the product. And then there was a lack of glass out there too, with the tariffs that were being applied on Chinese imports. And so all of these together combined, 2021, it made a big impact on our bottom line as a business. And we're feeling those effects to this day. We did lose a lot of shelf space. We did lose a lot of placements in restaurants, but we're working on getting those back. You know, in the beginning of this year, I spent the first 3 months just out in the market, 4 weeks sometimes back to back, just going out, meeting buyers, meeting distributors, getting back out there post-COVID. Now, do we need to reinvent the wheel? I don't know. Do we need to do something unique and think outside of the box? Absolutely. Are we the right people to do it? I think so. Because you can't reinvent wine in itself. You can't change the liquid. You can be creative with packaging. You can be creative with marketing. But wine is a product that is steeped in tradition and steeped in terroir. So why would you want to be creative with a product that showcases a sense of place? So yes, we've got challenges, but as an industry, I think we're working together to overcome those challenges. There's also a sense of neo-prohibition at the moment. I think COVID also caused that. It could be maybe people drank too much through COVID and are now pulling back, or just this new trend of being kinder on your body. You know, I think people learned a lot through COVID. People changed as well through COVID. So they're drinking less, which is fine, We're also seeing our core demography kind of age out with the boomers, the baby boomers. And Gen X has started to pick up on wine, but Gen Z and millennials to a certain extent haven't taken to wine. I think the industry as a whole hasn't been able to make wine appealing and sexy for millennials and Gen Z. And I think that's our biggest challenge, is how do we make wine attractive? Craft cocktails, canned seltzers, alcoholic seltzers, that's hurting the wine industry big time. So it could be a fad, it could be momentary, but we need to speak and communicate with the younger audience, and we need to showcase the responsible farming that we're doing here, because that's what they're attracted to. Sustainability, responsible stewardship, that's what really draws the new wine consumer to any product. So our challenge is to get that across to them. I think, you know, it's baby steps. We don't have the kind of money that corporations have to throw at marketing. So it's very organic in many ways, word of mouth. But this year has been positive for us. We're seeing more people coming back to the tasting room after a slump last year. The weather's been kind to us this year too. So, and of course, the tasting room in itself is a seasonal business. We see more folks coming in through spring all the way through to fall. And we're seeing that traffic pick up. So there is a lot of positive things to take away and a lot of positivity in the valley as a whole. So we just need to hunker down and survive and make it to that next stage and just succeed at attracting new consumers. I think that's what the key is as of today.
So what comes next for you? Obviously, you have a lot of new in your life right now. So tell us about the next couple years, what you're excited about, things you haven't done yet that you want to.
So, like I said before, I've got a baby coming in July. So that's my next milestone, and it's gonna shift focus away for a little bit. But for me, we've got this beautiful estate here, and I'd like to capitalize on that. I want wine tourism to grow, and I think I can play a big role in that. May it be hospitality or experiences. I think people are willing to spend money on an experience over just a product. So we do offer tours of the estate. We offer sit-down meals paired with our wines. So people are attracted to those experiences, and I think if we can find a way to be able to build hospitality here, I think that's going to add another source of revenue, not just for Left Coast, but if I can showcase that to others in the valley, I think that can really transform the local Oregon industry. Sure, we've got some challenges, and we've got certain bills that don't allow us to do certain things, but that's what life is about, overcoming challenges. And I've been doing it for the entirety of my career, so nothing should stop me, hopefully. We'll see how things go. But beyond that, I think the challenges that the wine industry faces will come to a head over the next couple of years, and we need to be at the forefront of innovation, may it be packaging or even in products. Like I said before, we can't really change the liquid. We can only provide things that people want, where there's a demand, or showcase something new that is attractive to consumers. So in 2021, from that vintage, for the very first time, we produced a carbonic Pinot Noir. So going to that Beaujolais style, which is lighter, fruitier, easy drinking. You could even chill the wine for a nice summer's day. And that's something that we have never done traditionally. We make wines in the traditional sense. And so we're taking these new winemaking approaches and creating products that are appealing to a younger demography, which is more approachable, less snobbish. We're taking out the complexity from understanding wines by speaking in their own language, and allowing them to connect with the product and the ethos behind the creation of that product. So for me, it's a continual journey of education, going out there, communicating what we're doing here in Oregon with buyers, with customers, and hopefully attracting them here for a visit to Oregon physically. I don't know if you were part of the visitor survey, profile survey that was done and presented to everyone, I think last week. The image of Portland is a big negative right now for tourism in the valley, and we need to overcome that. And I think we can only do that if we come together, not just as an industry, but as a community, to overcome some of those challenges that the city faces. Even though we're an hour away, the inflow of tourists in Portland does trickle down to the Central Valley and further south. So yes, we have challenges, certain challenges that we have no control over, but every step in the right direction together, I think will help us get there. I have a lot of positive outlook for Oregon and the Willamette Valley. I think we will start seeing growth again in the market. And what's really comforting to me is that people now associate the Willamette Valley with quality wines. So when I say, yes, we're from the Willamette, oh yeah, great Pinot Noir. You know, it's not just, oh yeah, you make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. It's really good Pinot Noir, it's really good Chardonnay, and really good Pinot Gris. And these varying styles that come out from one area within Oregon, all having their unique profile and characteristics. And I think that's really attractive to wine consumers. So yes, challenging times, but exciting nonetheless.
Last question for you. What are you proudest of? What's your greatest accomplishment?
Personally, in my personal life, I think my greatest accomplishment was giving my wife the platform that she deserved to be the person that she is today. When we moved out to Oregon, you know, it's all new for her, so she kind of went into a little shell. And I pushed her to get out there. She signed up for the MBA program at Portland State, graduated, got hired by the provost at Portland State, worked with the provost for 2 years, and just found her feet. She's a confident, self-believing, proactive woman. And when I look at her and I see how she has changed over the past 8 years, it gives me a lot of pride. To know that I was a part of that I helped her get there. Personally, on the work front, I think bringing a certain level of sophistication here with sales, expanding our exports, and creating a sense of excellence beyond winemaking would be my biggest and proudest moment here at Left Coast. I believe in leading by example as opposed to just telling people what to do. So if I'm able to influence even one person here, that's a proud moment for me. We have a great team here at Left Coast, and we treat everyone as part of a big family. And when people are happy doing the job, coming in every day, that gives me the most satisfaction I could get out of this job. Like I said many times before, it's important that I maintain that passion for wine and for the industry, because without passion, there's no point doing this. And buyers and consumers, they can sense that passion, or if it's lacking. And so for me, it's important to maintain that passion, to continue growing, to continue challenging myself, getting myself outside of that comfort zone by doing things like teaching at Linfield, or getting on the board, or becoming a wine judge. And that's something my wife also helped me with, is just pushing me to do things that were beyond my comfort zones. Because I learned a lot, and I hope I can continue doing that over time to become not just a better human being, but also a better professional.
All right, all the questions we have for you. Anything we didn't ask that we should have, or anything we didn't cover today that you'd like to cover?
I think that's everything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Taking the time, sharing your story, sharing this amazing space with us.
Of course. Thank you.
Go ahead and let you off the hook.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.